It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the first edition of the Front Burners in the month of March 2025. I'm happy that we landed safely in the month of March. I am blessing Eichie. Let me tell you about someone else who had a safe landing and made history on this day, March 3rd, 2005. So American adventurer Steve Fawcett became the first person to complete a non-stop solo circumnavigation of the globe without refueling when he landed in Kansas after more than 67 hours of flight. Wow, that's a great feat. So that means today you can decide to do something that will be written in the annals of history. Let me find out from my co-hosts if they've done something that is written somewhere in history or they intend to make history. Good morning, Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze. Happy New Month.
Blessing, good morning, a blessed month of March. And I think there's a second place for Oyinpreye Krumale to make that history of moving around the globe.
Okay. Preye Krumale, good morning. It's March.
It's March, yes.
Yes, I got the memo. We sort of align with the colors we choose to put on today.
Well, that's great. Well, I don't want to tell them it's a coincidence, or maybe I already said that. Good morning, Doc. Good morning, Blessing. And my weekend, it was eventful.
It was 12 hours. It was 12 hours.
It was less than that.
Less than 12 hours.
Yes.
We'll look for a way to do something around that. Maybe look for a planet where you can get like maybe 84 hours in a day. In the meantime, that's something you don't want to miss. You know that's the first segment of the show, right? But if you're a first-time viewer, that's the first segment. After that, we'll bring you news analysis and then we'll move on to policy discuss. And then we'll get to hear from you on post and perspective. So right away, you can begin to type your messages as we go over to Swift and then return something you don't want to miss. Okay, let's find out what other stories made it into the news. One of them is on trade transaction facilitation by the CBN and the Nigerian Customs Service. So that process is being automated. The Nigerian Customs Service, NCS, and the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, have reaffirmed their commitment to actually strengthening that so that it will be easy for trade transactions to happen on an automated system. So this commitment was made when the Controller General of the Customs emphasized the importance of seamless integration between customs and banks to modernize trade-related payments. So during a visit to the CBN governor last week, so the Customs Controller General actually talked about that, and then there's a system being developed which is called the B-Odogu system that aims to modernize customs operations, streamline trade documentation, and enhance revenue collections. The new system replaces the expired contract with the previous service provider, which had undergone multiple extensions before the government entered a new concession agreement in 2023. So the B-Odogu system will be like just one platform for documentation and of course revenue generation payment and other things that those who are doing trade or those who are needing the services of the Nigerian Customs would have to do. The automation process, we saw that happen with the one single window which was launched earlier, and then this transaction platform, the B-Odogu system by the CBN, collaboration between the CBN and the Nigerian Customs Service. It looks like, so this time around, every bottleneck that delays time in which trade is completed is being removed to make it easier for importers, exporters to have their trade done easily. Doc?
Yeah, I think, like I always say, some things not deserving or newsworthy, really, because they should be, for me, just automatic. It bothers me at what point agencies of government understand that they are supposed to be synergizing. We have one federal government that supervises custom, supervises the CBN, and other government agencies. And I think it should just be natural. Is it that there's no meeting that happens from time to time? that this operation in silos is one of the things that actually has dragged us back. That when I am designing a system, I must also be factoring in who are the stakeholders in this system. I think from even the conception, the CBN should be at the forefront, because for that system to operate, you need to have the payment structure, the documentation process, which of course some of them will have to involve NPA, External Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC, for clearing to be easy. So everybody should sit around one table and design a platform that can drive trade. But costly visit is part and parcel of government process. And here for me, it's like the deal is done. Now you are praying and asking for support. I think this conversation should have even started before the design of the system, so that you will look at what is possible with CBN, what is the law that governs them says, and how that integration can happen before even starting the test run. And I think that synergy is what government agencies need, not necessarily to start a process, and when you will not get stuck on implementation, then you are not driving other parts into the conversation. So if it starts at the design phase, it will just be seamless, and some of these things will not need to make the headlines.
Now, talking about synergy, the Controller General of the Nigeria Customs Service also brought to the fore the issue of integration challenge, which was as a result of resistance by some authorized dealer banks, and they appealed to the central bank governor to prevail on commercial banks to allow the integration process to commence and become seamless. So this working in silos, not having synergies, some agencies of government that are supposed to complement the effort of the other, more like wanting to be lobbied or wanting to remain the way things are done. What's your take on it?
Okay, from the onset, when the Nigerian Customs Service is doing this, obviously from what they stated, the objective is to make sure that they do away with the previous system, which they have been renewing, and the recent expiration demands and all of that, and they are adopting an indigenous system. So for the developed, what are they called, the BDCs, no, not BDCs, the development money banks, the ones you just mentioned,
yes,
and the central bank, including the commercial banks, they should have been part and part of the process in drawing up what should constitute it. For example, you have the Nigerian Interbank Settlement System. I believe all the banks are on that platform. So it's easy to integrate the BODOGO system to that. If all the banks are in that, all commercial banks are in that platform, and I dare say the central bank also is in that platform in order to carry out its regulatory functions among the commercial banks. So if it is there, then we can begin to talk about issues of how they can have a system that is friendly to all the different commercial banks, that is approved. And when we're talking about this, the information technology, the IT representatives of the central bank and the conglomerate of all the commercial banks, including the Nigerian Customs Service, should have been on the table to draw this up, including the interface, the back end of the system, the codes that will be necessary, so that it's this excuse of, okay, we are going to take a look at it, understudy the system, which is going to, throw up another form of bottleneck and bureaucracy, and that is going to waste time. And if it's going to waste time, it could hold back the Nigerian Customs Service of really operating with what they've started, except probably they carry out any test run system. But now, as we speak, a proper test run system cannot be executed because the commercial banks are not in that platform at the moment. The Central Bank of Nigeria itself is not in the platform because they will need time to understudy it. At the same time, I don't want to believe the Nigerian Customs Service will want to jump into a project of this magnitude without consulting with the Central Bank of Nigeria and with the commercial banks? Like you rightly said, probably there is this misconception or disagreement about the banks or about among the stakeholders.
Yeah,
and if there is this disagreement, they should have sat down to come to a consensus.
There's no disagreement. What you see here is that every agency of government is trying to do its own thing. And so, CG Customs, I have an assignment on me, and I feel, oh, this is what I want to do. So I decide to do my things. CBN is doing its own thing. Commercial bank is doing its own thing. Now, the problem here is that, especially when it has to do with technology, it's either we are using the same vendor to supply us a system, or we are going to now say, okay, I am in isolation. Just imagine what happened when the banks themselves even were trying to migrate from one system application to another. Access Bank is still having its challenge. Surgery Bank at a point. And every bank had this issue. First Bank, everyone had their own dose of migrating their own system to a new software they are buying. You get the picture. So now you are designing a system that the banks are going to integrate into. Now, there are things that must have to be factored into this conversation. The interoperability of the system. That if customer has its own gateway, some has their own gateway, NAFDAC has their own gateway, CBN has their own gateway, the commercial banks have their own gateway to plug into the system. Now, will it be compatible? And that's the point I'm making, that before you design a system, you have to also factor into that design who is using that system or who is likely to use that system. Now, if these people are likely to use the system, have their own platform. Now, again, you also need to negotiate with your vendor whether this thing can easily be synergized. So what that means is that if I have to migrate into your system, and of course, we are not compatible, it's like asking me to design a new system to fit into your own, or then you have to reevaluate your own. That's what I'm making. That for government agencies, which is one thing that we must not stop talking about, is that we have one government whose responsibility is to make for the good governance, the welfare of the citizens, of course, which include regulation from CBN and also revenue generation from Nigerian Customs Service. Now, the issue is that anytime I want to do something as custom, I must factor in who is going to be part and parcel of it. That from the design phase, everybody has to be there and see how will this thing work, how will it pan out. So I don't design my own thing, now begging others to plug into it.
Okay.
And without putting into cognizance the interoperability of that system.
I think one of the issues here is agencies of government having their own targets, having their own agenda, and not moving in sync with those who would depend on whatever that agenda is or would work to facilitate that agenda. It's more like surprise. So it's when we're done with what we're working on that we let the other agencies that need to be part of this know. You pointed out that it is unlikely that at the early stages CBN was not carried along. Well, maybe they were carried along on the plan, but not in the building of the mechanism of the application or software that will power the Biodugu system. So perhaps what the bank is considering now is how to make it work. There may be cost implications as well. It may also need to change some of their internal operations. So going around this is the challenge. Now the CBN governor is being asked to talk to the commercial banks, and the CBN governor has agreed that he will ensure compliance. But what this will result to is that in the meantime, while there is still that reluctance, maybe not exactly a reluctance, perhaps a challenge with the integration. So it means that there will be some problems encountered in the usage of the Biodugu system for customers. So pending when that integration happens, there may be a revert to the old system, or you may have some delays and the benefits of the system may not actually be gotten by traders, because the Biodugu system is to ensure that trade is done seamless. There's documentation, there's payment, and there's transparency for those who are having international trade done. So I think that going forward, what should be done is that when we are designing a system, every stakeholder that will be part of that should be duly consulted. Whatever technology that will be used should be agreed upon, so that from the beginning there is the adjustments. If you need to give it a timeline to say, at this time we're doing away with the old system, and it doesn't come upon those who depend on it as a surprise, and then it's at the final stage that people are beginning to make adjustments, try to get used to the system, try to study it, try to understand and develop their own operations, or arrange their own operations to suit it. So everything should be done properly at the right time, so that when we're launching and we're saying this is the new system we have moved on to, you've already built anticipation for those who are going to use it to say, oh, this will be seamless. So when they're beginning to get frustrations and they are told, oh, it's not from customs, it is because the commercial banks are not yet fully integrated into the system, these sometimes discourages and water down the gains of such move.
Okay, so I think from the onset, I want to quickly make reference to the back and forth, the loggerhead between the Academic Staff Union of Universities and the federal government when the federal government launched the IPPIS and wanted to bring on board. One of the arguments against the federal government by the Academic Staff Union of Universities was that, look, the IPPIS is not an indigenous platform. It was not churned out using indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge meaning bringing into bear or putting into consideration all the peculiarities of our university system. And then one of the allegations, another allegation held by ASU against the government was that, look, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy this system, to bring it into Nigeria to operate, and this system does not put into consideration some of the peculiarities that our client is exposed to. So if you are going to do that, we are going to do ours. If that's the case, we are going to generate a product as well. And for how long? How long was the time as we went to go and develop their own system, locally made, indigenous system? At that particular point in time, because of the politics involved, the government subjected it to the assessment of the National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, that carried out an assessment on it. And NITDA gave its own assessment and where they think the loopholes lie and the corrections that ASU, the builder of ASU's system, do indigenous, needed to make. So if we're doing that, when we import foreign products into the country to come and run our system, do we also submit it at the footsteps or at the table of NIDA to access it, to make sure that it has the requisite peculiarities to bring into consideration regarding our system? If we are not doing that, then I think we should start doing that. And for the Biodugu system, when they started this process, because it's a huge project, it's not just a petty project, was NIDA involved? Was the Central Bank of Nigeria involved? And if the banks are not involved and they just did a recent transition into a new system, it's going to take a lot, because the banks will not have to go and reassess their system or to reconfigure a specific part of their system to suit that of the Biodogo system. It will now be the responsibility of the Biodogo system to make sure it has knowledge of all the systems that the banks are working with, then to inculcate that into the Biodogo system to go to meet all the requisite peculiarities so that we can move ahead. And if we don't do that, we are still going to be in the trial stage, and before you know it, another 2 years, 3 years will run by then before we come up with a specified plan to make sure that all parties are involved.
I think what the Cost 46 did is one thing for me that will just be the way forward for us as a country. The onegovernment.gov, where of course the 96 participants in that particular course agreed and asked Mr. President to write an executive order mandating all MDAs to migrate into this one portal. And I think that solves the whole problem. You see, whether it's the ASU issue, the thing still boiled down to stakeholders' engagement and the silo nature of the operations of most MDAs. And I have heard even the DG of NIM say this, that the biggest problem since he assumed office, he has found with the governance issues in Nigeria is the ego of the various DGs and CGs who feels that, look, I have a mandate, I have to execute my mandate. But the truth of the matter is that your mandate is not within your boundary, because it's also cut across whatever thing that you are doing. So for me, going forward, the one solution is that we have a national platform, the e-government platform, where every agencies of government key into. And then, of course, we have a national law that also empower maybe the commercial banks, whether it's the microfinance bank or whatever financial system that we operate, that they can key into that system, that at the click of a button, whatever service you want, whether it's the exchange rate, whether it is to transfer FS or whatever it is, get happen on one single portal. And then, of course, we've saved time, we have saved money, and the process of clearing becomes very easy, and everybody seems happy at the end of the day. But for me, whatever anybody is trying to adopt, as long as it's going to cut across boundary, there is not something that you're going to use alone, and other people are going to be part of it. From design phase, there should be stakeholder engagement. We must talk with appropriate agencies who are likely to be also part user of this kind of a system, so that everybody has a common understanding. And then we don't set up a system and not doing this series of costly visits to appeal to people to patronize what we have single-handedly designed.
And at that point, it would then seem like a black mirror, like you've designed a platform, so it's the other agency that is delaying the implementation or delaying the commencement of it. Meanwhile, certain things were not factored in place at the very beginning. So I think we should do things better. It is not a thing that you want to put your name on the books to say it was during your tenure as DG that you did this, you did that. But at the end of the day, it should be about how will this work? Who are those that will make it work? What do they need to make it work? And what input is coming in, so that when we say we're launching or transiting to a new system, the users of the system actually feel the relief and see the need why we moved from the old system to one. So I hope that the CBN governor can talk to the commercial banks, and whatever the challenges are will be addressed in good time, so that the Biodogo system traders can begin to enjoy the benefits that it is said to come with.